Welcome to the deep dive, where real deals come alive. Listen to the beat of the market, one move at a time.
You know, the property tax system often feels a lot like sitting down to play a really high-stakes board game where everyone else at the table already knows the rules.
Right, and you've just been handed the dice.
Exactly. You roll, you pay up, and you mostly just hope you aren't going bankrupt in the process. Because you're basically playing against a bank that holds all the cards, which, happens to be the government.
Yeah, and because the government is the bank, our default human reaction is just passivity. We tend to view property tax assessments as these firm edicts rather than, say, opening offers.
Oh, totally. You get that official-looking document in the mail with a terrifying number on it, and the instinct is just to assume that, a team of meticulous forensic accountants arrived at that figure using infallible math.
Right, which is rarely the case.
But the reality of this particular board game, especially if you look at the source material we're diving into today, which is the Texas Homeowners Guide to Property Tax Protests, the rules actually heavily favor the player.
They really do. The guide explicitly calls the Texas property tax system one of the most taxpayer-friendly codes in the nation.
Which sounds crazy, right? But the catch is that you have to actually bother to read the instruction manual before you roll. It is a completely opt-in friendliness.
Exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly how that works. We want to give you, the listener, the practical, potentially very lucrative tools to navigate this.
And what's fascinating here is the sheer timing of all this. Because assessment notices are basically hitting mailboxes right now from early April to mid-May.
So millions of people are opening those envelopes and experiencing that annual spike of blood pressure right about now.
Right, which makes this the exact perfect moment to shift from being a passive homeowner to an active advocate for your own wallet. And the absolute core, right at the center of this whole guide, is your ability to protest an appraisal to the Appraisal Review Board, or the ARB.
But wait, before we send you into the, the adversarial arena of a formal protest, we have to make sure your basic armor is actually equipped.
Yes, the first line of defense.
Because it turns out the easiest, most mathematically powerful way to lower your tax burden doesn't even require a hearing. It just requires confirming your exemptions.
Right, the general homestead exemption. It is the foundational layer of protection. Because when we talk about an exemption, we aren't talking about a flat discount on your final tax bill.
It's way better than that.
It is. We're talking about removing a massive chunk of your home's value from the taxable equation entirely. So for 2025, the state-mandated school district exemption is $140,000.
Okay, let's unpack this because the math is substantial. If I look online and my local appraisal district says my home is worth, say, $400,000,
the school district is legally blind to $140,000 of that value.
Wow. So they can only calculate my tax based on $260,000.
Exactly. And the school district usually makes up the largest portion of your tax bill. Plus, that's just the state baseline. Cities and counties can actually offer even more exemptions on top of that.
So how do you actually check this?
It's super simple. You go to your local appraisal district's website, look up your property, and look at the exemption section. You're looking for the letters HS, which stands for General Homestead.
And if it's your primary residence and you don't see those letters?
Well, the chief appraiser is actually legally required to send you a notice of eligibility and an application form.
Wait, really? The government actively flags properties to offer them a tax break?
Yeah, it's a rare moment of bureaucratic grace, honestly. But if you fall through the cracks, or maybe you just moved in, you just need to submit Form 5114.
And the deadline for that is April 30th, right?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
But if you just moved in, you qualify immediately. You don't have to wait until next year. And even if you totally spaced on this, you could file a late application for up to 2 years past the deadline and still get it.
That's incredibly forgiving. And we should also mention that this structural grace really extends for seniors, right?
Oh, absolutely. The moment a homeowner turns 65, that state-mandated school exemption jumps from $140,000 to $200,000.
Which is huge for someone on a fixed income.
It is, but the extra exemption isn't even the best part. That would be the tax ceiling, or what people call the freeze.
The freeze, right. How does that work?
So when you turn 65, your school taxes are capped. As long as you own and live in that home, those school taxes will never increase past what you paid the year you qualified.
Even if the market value of the house quadruples?
Even if it quadruples, unless you make major additions like, I don't know, building a new wing or a swimming pool, that bill stays locked.
Okay, so that's incredible armor for seniors. But let's talk about everyone else for a second. Because the primary source of panic right now is watching property values just shoot to the moon.
Oh, yeah.
If I look online and see my home's quote-unquote market value skyrocketed by 20% this year, should I panic? Like, is my tax bill going up 20%?
No, and this is such a crucial point. That anxiety comes from conflating two distinctly different legal terms. You have market value and you have appraised value.
Okay, break that down for us.
Market value is basically the appraiser's educated guess of what your house would sell for on the open market on January 1st. So yeah, in a hot market, that can absolutely spike by 20 or 30%.
Right.
But your appraised value, which is the figure your taxes are actually based on, that is insulated. Because once you've had the homestead exemption for a full year, you get what's called the 10% cap.
Ah, okay. So my taxable value cannot increase by more than 10% a year, regardless of how crazy the market gets.
Exactly. The market value is allowed to reflect the wild bidding wars, but your taxable appraised value has a legally controlled growth curve.
This episode is brought to you by Property Hermanos Group, your real estate experts. Ready to buy, sell, or level up your life? Call the Hermanos. From San Antonio to the Rio Grande Valley, we help you move smarter, faster, and with confidence. And agents, listen up. Our team is growing. If you're tired of chasing deals and ready to build real wealth with systems, support, and income beyond commissions, it's time to give us a call. Call now, 956-434-1575 or 210-710-6258. Property Hermanos Group. Don't just make a move. Make the right move with the Hermanos.
So if my market value jumps from $500,000 to $650,000, my taxable value can only go up to $550,000.
Right, spot on. And that gap can widen year after year, saving you a massive amount of money.
Okay, so our basic armor is equipped, but what if that assessment notice arrives and the county's baseline valuation is just fundamentally wrong, like artificially inflated from the start?
Well, then your 10% cap is just locking in a terrible starting number. And that means it's time to shift from passive exemptions to active defense.
The formal protest.
Exactly. Building your case. And the very first step, the gateway to everything, is the deadline.
May 15th.
May 15th, or no later than the 30th day after the notice was mailed to you. And that is a strict legal boundary. The key word is mailed.
Not delivered.
Right, postmarked. If the post office loses your mail for 3 weeks, the clock was still ticking, miss this window, and you completely lose your right to appeal for the whole year.
Okay, so assuming we hit the deadline, the guide says you file Form 50-132. But there's a massive strategic pitfall here in Section 3, right?
There is. Section 3 asks for the reason for your protest, and it gives you a bunch of boxes. You absolutely must check 2 specific boxes: incorrect appraised market value, and value is unequal compared with other properties.
Because if you don't check them now, you can't bring them up later.
Exactly. It's administrative law. If the box isn't checked, the argument is legally barred from the hearing.
I always think of checking both those boxes like fighting a speeding ticket, but from 2 entirely different angles.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
How so? Well, the first box, incorrect market value, that's you arguing the raw data. You're saying, my speedometer proves I wasn't going 80 miles an hour. My house wouldn't sell for this much.
Right.
But the second box, unequal appraisal, is an argument about fairness. It's like saying, even if I was going 80, the officer ignored the 3 cars next to me going 85 and only pulled me over. You're saying they're taxing you more than your neighbor with the exact same house.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, proving that unequal appraisal requires understanding how the appraisal district actually works, because they do not have enough people to custom appraise every single house.
They use mass appraisal,
Right.
like algorithms.
Exactly. They group neighborhoods into schedules and apply multipliers. A bump for a brick exterior, a deduction for no garage.
So if their algorithm arbitrarily classifies my subdivision as an A-plus neighborhood, but the identical one across the street is a B, my taxes are artificially inflated.
Which leads to the absolute most powerful tool you have, the evidence packet. By law, if you ask for it at least 14 days before your hearing, the district has to give you the exact data, schedules, and formulas they're using against you.
So you get to see their math before you even walk into the room.
You do. And that's where you find the errors. You might see they're comparing your unrenovated 1980s house to a fully modernized home down the street. Or maybe they wrongly list your house as having 3 bathrooms when you only have 2.
Oh, wow. So if you find a factual error like that, do you really have to go to war in a formal hearing?
Usually, no. And that's the beauty of the 14-day rule. It levels the playing field. Once you have their data, you can just call the appraisers, point out the error. Districts are overwhelmed with protests, so if you show them irrefutable proof they made a mistake, they'll often just offer an informal settlement right then and there.
Okay, but what if the error isn't clerical? What if the algorithm thinks my house is in great condition because of curb appeal, but they can't see the massive foundation crack hidden under my rug?
Then you need hard evidence. You have to bring things the assessor can't see from the street.
Like photos.
Timestamp photos of damage, yes.
Yeah.
But more importantly, repair estimates. Because an appraiser isn't a contractor. They don't know what a cracked foundation costs to fix. You need receipts for work done after January 1st or formal estimates from licensed professionals.
Right. You have to put a concrete dollar amount on it. And what about comps? Comparable sales?
This is a huge one. Do not rely on list prices from Zillow or Redfin.
Because a list price is just a seller's fantasy. Correct?
Exactly. It's not economic reality. The only valid comps are closed sales. Money has to have actually changed hands, and it needs to be as close to January 1st as possible.
Okay, so you've got your closed comps, your photos, your contractor estimates, you filed the paperwork. Let's talk about the actual arena, the hearing room.
The execution phase.
Yes, because the guide walks us through some really critical do's and don'ts here. And the first big one is don't skip the informal meeting.
Right. Most districts offer a sit-down with a staff appraiser before the formal ARB hearing. And this is your absolute best chance to settle.
It's more of a conversation, right?
Totally. You're sitting across from someone whose main job is to clear the docket. If you show them good evidence, they can make a binding settlement offer on the spot. If you skip this or turn them down, then you walk into the rigid machinery of the formal appraisal review board.
And that machinery is intense. If you go to the ARB, you only get 15 minutes to present your whole case.
15 minutes to argue the value of your most significant financial asset.
That's terrifying.
It is, and you can't just pass your phone around a table to show them a picture. You have to bring physical hard copies of all your evidence for the district appraiser and every single board member.
You're basically acting as your own lawyer.
Exactly. You have to be concise, genuine, and kind. And because time is so limited, you cannot bring up irrelevant arguments.
Irrelevant meaning what?
Do not argue about the tax bill or the tax rates or how the government is spending money. The ARB only determines property value. They have zero legislative power over the budget.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting in the guide. It specifically says, don't focus on your ability to pay. And honestly, that feels incredibly cold.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, if a homeowner is getting priced out of their neighborhood because of taxes, isn't that the whole point of protesting?
On a human emotional level, yes. The threat of being taxed out of your home is a very visceral reality. But the ARB operates under a strict legal mandate.
You're just looking at the math.
Right.
Yeah.
Their only job is determining accurate market value. The mathematical answer to what a house is worth doesn't change whether the owner is a billionaire or a retired teacher on a fixed income.
Wow.
So arguing financial hardship, while totally valid emotionally, wastes your 15 minutes on a legally invalid point. You have to strip the emotion out and argue the data.
Speak the language of the algorithm to beat the algorithm.
All right, so let's recap this toolkit for everyone listening. Step 1, secure your homestead exemption with Form 50-114 to lock in that 10% cap.
Step 2, hit the May 15th deadline.
Step 3, check both boxes on Form 50-132, incorrect market value and unequal appraisal.
Step 4, demand that evidence packet 14 days out so you can check their math.
Step 5, use closed sales, not list prices, and bring hard evidence like repair estimates. And finally, take the informal meeting and keep emotion out of your 15-minute ARB hearing.
That's the playbook.
And look, if this all feels overwhelming, there are tons of taxpayer assistance resources, advocacy groups, and video guides online. You do not have to do this alone.
But, you know, this raises an important question.
What's that?
Well, the entire Texas property tax system is designed to be taxpayer-friendly. It has all these robust mechanisms, the exemptions, the caps, the right to demand their data.
Right.
But that friendliness heavily relies on the individual taxpayer actively policing and protesting their own property values every year.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
If the accuracy of a neighborhood's tax burden depends entirely on which neighbors have the time, the knowledge, and the resources to fight the appraisal district, What does that mean for the fairness of the system as a whole?
That is such a good point. It's a system that basically rewards the informed and penalizes the passive. Does an opt-in system really create equitable taxation, or does it just selectively lower the burden for the people who already know how to play the board game?
Exactly.
Man, definitely something for you to mull over the next time you open one of those assessment envelopes. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.
Welcome to the deep dive.